All right, so welcome and good afternoon. I'm Liz, and I'm going to be introducing to you Rosemary and her husband, Stephen. Okay, so Rosemary, as you may or may not know, has worked here as a docent for over 7 years. But prior to being a docent, for 30 years, she was in aerospace. Okay? On the VicNet website, it says her special skills are media, communication, and social media. I don't think that even covers what she is good at. She is a fabulous artist. She's known for her portrait paintings, and she's also an author. Her first book was about her famous father, who was also an artist. His name was Rosemary Vasquez. Now, her husband is equally pretty accomplished. Okay, so Dr. Steve Tuthill, was a consultant. He consulted for various companies, including Anderson Consulting and IBM. He's an expert on computer science and AI. He also is an author and has books and patents on AI. So, both Rosemary and her husband created an inspirational mural. It merges history, art, and technology. It depicts the America's 250th anniversary, which is a timely accompaniment to our special exhibit. Okay, so without further ado, the Tuthills.
Okay, so Rosemary knows that I ramble on for a long time and talk, so I thought that I'd write something out and try to use it for guardrails, but basically, that's a blank sheet of paper. Whenever you're designing anything, doesn't matter what it is, but you're starting there, and you have to start considering so many things because you're setting up your own guardrails when you do that. And so what I was saying in this is that just when you're looking at it, it's like, where do you begin? What do you include? And more importantly, what do you leave out? And you have to ensure accuracy and balance and consistency when history itself is both complex and contested. And we learn more about what is and what's not. So wanted to get into that and how we got here. So Rosemary and I encountered this challenge in 2018.
Are you talking about the Eastville mural?
Mm-hmm, when they commissioned, 2008. 2008? When they first commissioned this, they became a city in...
Oh, Eastvale, yeah.
Eastvale, yes.
Yeah, 2018.
And so they commissioned a mural. So this is where we started that. So give me the next one on this. So we needed a reference. And this was a mural that her father had done for the city of Anaheim for their 125th anniversary. But what we encountered for ours is that Eastvale was a brand new city. It's been around, it was like Norco was North Corona. Eastvale was a part of Corona. And it was full of dairies and vineyards and that for a very, very long time. But there was actually a school there called Eastvale in the late 1800s. And that school is actually about 3/4 of a mile from where we live. Get the next one. So we did this mural, and on this, we started back 5,000 years ago when the indigenous people were actually living along the Santa Ana River. And from that, then we had all the Spanish land grants, which was Jurupa and all of those areas. So hit the next one out. So what we had to do was start doing research about what we were going to do to put in our mural. But by the way, last note on Eastvale is it's currently completing a 160-acre downtown that has a fire station and police station and huge city hall where they're going to rededicate the mural that she did that's in the current city hall. So that's pretty interesting. So when we started doing research about 250 years of this country, and I talked about guardrails earlier. Well, we started with guardrails, and we started at saying this is going to be on a 4-foot by 8-foot mural painting.
That's a question.
Yeah.
Sure, yes.
We need to be informal. So, what started this? How did you get the idea? I know you did that mural, but what prompted you? We should do one of these about 250 years of history. Where'd that come from?
Well, it kind of started with the Eastville mural. We were really looking a way to make some money, and so we thought we'd put our art to work. So Steve convinced, they had a committee that was in 2018 that invited the community to throw out some ideas to do some things around the city. And so we went to that meeting and said, we want to create a mural. And that was based on my father's mural in the City Hall. So
But how did that translate to this?
That's right. So, and he asked about the 250th.
right,
Yeah,
so
did you sit around one night and say, we should do one of those about?
yes, so after we finished that and it was all done and hello.
I didn't know if you guys were talking about.
No, go ahead, come on in, absolutely, come on in. That's Ford, the little dog, he's so cute. So then he started thinking, well, what are some of the other places? What are some of the other states? And all of a sudden he goes, wait a minute, we got a 250th anniversary come up in 2026. Now we're talking about this after 2020. So there were some other cities too. There was a lot of cities, a lot of states that had some kind of an anniversary coming up. But we didn't have time for those, so we thought of wanted to do the big one.
Got it.
Yeah, so we basically started the design in 2023. Anyways, he can,
Okay. Thanks for that.
So it was a research, even with computers and that, while I'm looking at the library, but there's just an endless amount of things about timelines of the country. But they're all written from a perspective, a bias or whatever, but you can look at the foods for the last 250 years or the politics for the last 250 years or that. So there are so many things that you could do, probably 250,000 of them. So we had to fit things into our guardrails, which were the 4-foot by 8-foot mural. So we started looking at a lot of references for history of the area. So go on to the next one. And so I found that we could fit them into 3 boxes: unity, freedom, and progress, and in that order. So we started constructing all the history that we knew about and started learning about that were milestone events. And while there could have been others, there could always be others, but we were trying to look at ones that both fit in the mural, made sense, and told a story of the country. So we basically got down that the freedom section these are not equal in terms of the strength of those or that, but freedom is a thing that and you'll see in the mural that it actually arches between them, because those were not milestone events. It was a continuing thing, and without that of freedom, there is no progress and there is no unity. So that's where we kind of phrase those in there. So move on to the next one, Ro. So we wanted to create something that could be seen in like a gallery setting, and move to the next one, or from an interactive desktop. That's a little more interactive than what we can currently do. But however, there is a group that wants to do an augmented reality overlay for our mural. So if you go to the website for it and you do mouse overs, all those vignettes have pop-ups that explain what they are that I'm going to be telling you about today anyway. But now with you do an overlay of augmented reality where these can actually move and you can have George Washington talking to you and giving a script, but nevertheless in whatever we imagine his voice to be, but talking about the revolution and the people and the trials and tribulations that they went through. So we're getting to that point. So that's basically what we're looking at now on that. So what we want to do is go to the next one, is say, how can we take Rosemary's skill set in art and mine in technology to enact this? And hit the next one. So looking at all of those fun things to do that, and created those with AI just for fun. You're talking about doing images. So those were really important things of how to balance, because if you do it all with art, like on the one at the Eastvale, we just had vignettes that kind of flowed together on that. But for this, we're talking about 250 years, so we're talking about more of a timeline. So how can we do that? So I try to set up from my standpoint and my systems, and she's also with the engineering background, so we kind of think in systems. We started the design of this in 23, like we were saying. And then what I did is to create, do an amalgam to preserve some technology as well as the art. I said, okay, let's actually use some technology here. So what I did is I said, let's create some vignettes based on the research that what we were doing. So I wanted to start with something that's more eye-catching, and it's Benjamin Franklin, my favorite of the founding fathers, just because he was such an individual, with the joiner die. And interestingly in this, there are only 8 colonies that they had, because when this was done well before things started getting serious, Georgia was still basically British enabled. They were very loyal to the British, even though Georgia was also a penal colony for the Brits. That's besides Australia, they were going to Georgia, interestingly enough. So we started with that as a concept, and this is the era from 1754 to 1773 of what was going on. So I don't have that where I was going to be briefed on now. I'm just going to talk. So we said, okay, the next interesting thing was that of the, you know where these guys are? Sons of Liberty. And those were the earlier civilian groups that started getting really interested in what can they do to disrupt and harass the British. So they would have kind of fun with that. And we had, and I'll get to them back in a minute. This was the Committee of Correspondence, and that's what was sending out all the information to the various colonies trying to unify. But this is also the Sons of the Revolution. So that's when they decided to dress up as their local Native Americans, the Mohegans, and some others, and disrupt the tea supply, which I had notes on that at one time for the value today compared to what that was, but it was in the millions of dollars worth of tea in today's dollars that went into the water. So
342 tons.
Sorry?
Over 342 tons.
And
I just had to do that for.
Really?
which is interesting. So did you also look at the value today?
I looked at the value. It's a shade under 2 million. It's 1.6 to 1.8 million.
Yeah, in today. So that I don't know how many fish it killed in the harbor, or so that I found was pretty interesting in there. And then we get over to the second row, and this is the early Continental Congress. So all of these are milestone events we tried to do. So we're moving into 1774. There were a lot of things that happened, preceding, and an incident here and an incident there that took place. So, and when I've talked about this, others say, well, you don't have this, you don't have that. And I said, yeah, I missed Arbor Day too, but you'll weigh in on it. So, and it's true, you can't have everything in here. But we tried to get those milestones in here. We moved from the Continental Congress over to Paul Revere, although there was a young lady named Sybil who also supposedly did a run much longer than his on that, but we all know Paul Revere, but that was a known milestone, which I would have omitted it, but everyone knows it, so that one I thought I had to have in there. So then we come up to something that was really critical, And I don't know how many people know about the olive branch petition,
Yes.
but it was our last and final offer to have a peaceful departure. So I felt that was an important one that's not overly known for the most part. And so then the rejection that was there was the declaration of causes. That was the next portion in there, and that's what came out of all of this. In this row, we're starting with the formation of the Continental Army. So the unity portion became more institutional, and they had to communicate that. So they had the Gazette formed to distribute to all of the colonies, which was the only way to do that. This one of Benjamin Franklin was interesting because all the currency was unique to each of the colonies. They all had their own. So he was designing the continental currency for that, which was important, but then it became a big joke at a point too. So, which happens to a lot of currency, which they're going to be seeing in Venezuela coming up. And then George Washington addressing the troops. So we had to get George started in there, but that was an interesting one. And we have, of course, the Liberty Bell. And then what was extremely important, which was the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So that's what had the interest for this. And Rosemary said we had to have a good one of Betsy Ross, so we gave her this in action. And Rosemary had the idea of the background for this to be the Declaration of Independence that's there on its parchment, but just, subtle in the background and not taking up, dominating, but yet that's there. You also notice in general in this, we have 50 stars running across the top, and across the bottom, we have some things I'll get to in the center, but we have all of the things for the symbolism of the laurel leaf, which is, achievement and loyalty in that. And the rose is our country's flower. So since we did everything else in gold, we did it in gold as well. So this is the part of unity. So we kicked some things around because we could have done the whole thing on staying on unity portion. So when we had those three boxes of things we were looking at, notice we don't have presidents per se, and we don't have other things that are in there. So it was hard to say that, but at this point right here, down to the flag, we know that we had the war, and we gained independence. So at some point now, there's a little flow still going here from there because you see here's this part showing up again, but I tried to hit this basically as the centuries move for the progress. So I thought that the one of the biggest symbol, because we saw it then, we see it today, and also with the "Don't Tread on Me" and that. So the Betsy Ross flag is prevalent, once again. So that's on that.
Let's see from back here, who are the four individuals around the icon on top?
Okay, so those are also part of the Founding Father group. Starting with, I wanted to start with the Statue of Liberty there and kind of work our way up to that. But the Statue of Liberty, we see her today as that, but in that era, it was Columbia. She was the Uncle Sam of the day, and she later became this, although I always thought that looked more like Elvis Presley's face, but that, and the Paramount Pictures was part of that too. So in this, you were asking us, so we have Franklin, and we have Jefferson, and we've got Hamilton, and who else I put in there? Hamilton. It'll come to me. But we have George in the middle, and because they were so gathered as a kindred group, most were Masons. So we have the symbolism of the basins in here, and then also from the all-seeing eye, and everything has its own symbolism. Wheat symbolizes prosperity and that of the country at the time. We recognize that of the freedom of the slaves, even though it didn't happen here, but it was happening as he went through. And then we also honored our civil rights activities. But like I say, there's so many things that one could have put in there, and we didn't do the Civil War, and we didn't do First World War, and Vietnam. So, but we recognized that this happened, and I did want to put that over here because we wanted to go more of this. So, but this freedom of the slaves was going on for a long time before we ever got to this era. So that was interesting on that. It still comes to me on that. So things we want to point out is, yes, we have our eagle with his clutch of arrows and olive branch, but freedom has a cost. And this is why Arlington Cemetery is in here. And while it didn't exist during the Revolutionary War, I thought it'd be appropriate to have a Revolutionary War soldier with his flag and a current soldier with ours. Freedom is this arch that touched here and continues to touch there. So that's why we got into that part of things. And now we move to things that get a little more interesting in the progress. So during the 1762, 1800, because we're moving from this branch over.
What did you tell them about the emblems?
Oh, yeah. So, sorry. We also have the military emblems as they stand today. And while there are a couple others that could go in there, like the CBs and others, but these are the primary, even taking us up to our space group, going through that. This tree, by the way, was the Liberty Tree in Massachusetts, which still exists today, interestingly enough. And they held meetings there, and there were rumors that some hangings took place there too for those that were not in the program. So moving back over to here. So what started happening was we were farming. We were an agrarian society, including Washington and the whole route there. So mechanization started coming in. We had a steam engine and others coming in, and that started moving people off the farms into the cities. Made a huge change, and I mean, this is just 1760, 1800. So here it takes us back over to this for the signing of that. But over here, we started going into the whole aspect of our trade in infrastructure. So we were emerging as a nation rather than a collection of independent states. So moving to 1801 and 1900, the biggest thing that came here was the Transcontinental Railroad, because that labeled us able to go through coast to coast. This one was for fun. I have Edison and Tesla with the AC and DC parts, and I'd like to have heard a lot of their discussions about patents and who owns what and who invented what. Be interesting for the day. So this was important because this was our westward movement. And whether they were going the Oregon Trail or what, we were moving west. This is Pittsburgh with the earliest of the steel mills, which then changed everything once again. That was a huge milestone for that capability. We gave a lot of it away, but we're getting it back, I understand. So 1901 to 2000, nothing major, just the automobile and the airplane. Had a huge impact on what was going on. And not only that in themselves, but a lot of people in this era didn't move much far from where they were born. And the automobile enabled that. And with Henry Ford making it available to his workers, enabled that farther. And it's the imagination of what you could do and grow and do. And with Wright Brothers and the beginnings of that part was interesting. Another milestone, which close to my heart, is that of the chips. and what they've done for the computer industry. And we're just sitting here in the like the 1980s, early 1990s, our trip to the moonwalk, and then that of the internet. Why the internet is being a milestone? Well, for good and for bad, it's with us, it's going to be with us, and it both has enabled and crippled a lot of things, in my opinion, for, I can argue on either side of the ledger for the benefits of the internet, but it's there, and there's a lot of opportunity for learning that goes in with this, so I thought that was pretty important, and we're getting to more where we are, our attempts at going to more green developed cities, for being more enabled for people residing with the technology. We're sitting in this era right here. It's where we are. So we have artificial intelligence and that of our DNA, which using CRISPR and other things, we are actually doing some modifications as seen by the COVID, doing the RNA ribonucleic acid modifications. So good or bad, but a lot of our pharmaceuticals are moving to that direction. And then we have coming up with more sophisticated cities, and then finally on to space stations. And for fun, decided to put the first of the, not as it was in the Star Trek lore, but it's the that of going to space and hopefully bringing good values and good intentions for doing so. So that's basically the overview of the mural. And when you saw those things, those boxes with the unity, freedom and progress, there are so many things that went in and came out, So these were the survivors of that, and were I to do it over, I don't know. So each of these were not a one-off, prompt and success. So even on the ones we kept, it was refining and refining and refining, and bearing in mind, Dolly and others are doing things a lot better now than they were when this was created. So it's just interesting how, a little time has changed, but so much has changed with the technology to enhance that. So once again, we looked at these, keeping these in sepia tones to give a taste of history and antiquity to it. And then we mentioned the Declaration of Independence was behind here. On this one, couldn't figure out a background, and finally came on the idea of doing a gradient. So you've got, from light going to space, so something that was different and not obstructing, but just kind of fading to the future on that. So I say challenging. I could have done some other things between these eras, but with this move west was I didn't go into how cattle made its impact and how the railroads, once they were established, so many things that went in, came out of the box. Some things went back in and then came out again. So, but standing back once again with that blank sheet of paper, where do you start? And it's like I say, it's what do you put in, what do you omit, and what are the impacts of each of those, and do they tell a story as you're going through?
I guess my next question, was there other sources or places that you had seen that had tried to do something like this? Tried to create this timeline, in American history? Because there are out there a lot that did. Do they have any impact on your work or inspiration?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
Well, maybe, I don't know about you.
Most, as I was saying earlier on that I saw some timelines, but they weren't strictly to the U.S. It was world based on how this affected that, and there wasn't.
There's quite a few in D.C. That's why I was asking. Quite a few. Masonic memorials all went there.
Oh, okay.
Happened.
So
and they wrap them through.
Exactly.
Make that draw.
And there are so many. Some of the timeline, you look at, and they're politically driven of what happened, what affected this to make that. So there were so many things, and but there was no single source I could do this. And I've been a history buff,
Right.
and with things that I knew and thought I knew. And a lot of it is what you think you know, because when you really get into it, it's like, well, I heard that differently. So a lot of those military things. Yes, ma'am.
How many hours did you guys spend?
That's a great question. We spent 7 months designing this before anything did anything. And that was shifting things from box to box to box to box. And then we did the layout in Photoshop, and then it got more this and that and that and that. And then we had it printed to see how it looked on a 4-foot by 8-foot canvas on stretcher bars. And from that, Rosemary took the painting aspects of this. So like I said, we tried to take technology and art, and for what we were doing, I mean, Rosemary wanted to leave a lot of these AI-produced things as they came out as best she could. But there's a standard of saying, okay, that's not quite good enough, so I'll do a little here and a little over there. And but for the most part, we were satisfied with how those came out, and just the task of putting those in there was its own challenge. But it's the size. I mean, I could have made these smaller and put in more things, but then you have that issue. Basically, sizing. Although you'll notice on this. This was a big event, so it made that stand out rather than just being in the flow. So that changed that part of it. And for these, didn't want there was no single event to stand out. So just tried to make something that stacked nicely without staggering in that. But there was no intent to do that, although I would say that if you look at, without this would have never happened for us. And without this, neither of those would have happened. So with the drive for freedom, which to me is the thing that both connects those. So the breakthrough that I had on this, and Rosemary was kind of interested in that, is that these two are large and that's smaller, but I made it connect. So it's another thing, when that's kind of the aha moment for me for the design, because like if you remember the mural that her father did and the one she did for Eastvale, they were vignettes that kind of flowed and connected, and there were reasons for this one to fade into that one. Was not doable for this. So I didn't want to make it look like individual tiles per se, but I thought rather than trying to do some nice circular thing or a flow, let's just say it as it is, and this is an event on there. So currently the actual mural is in our garage, and that one will state we are doing prints of those and others, and we went to Washington D.C. for the Nixon Summit. And met with a few interesting people. One was Daryl Issa, who liked the concept of the mural, and he asked if we send him a small print. He would put it on Donald Trump's desk, because he thinks this should be the symbol of the 250th. So we appreciate that. We'll see what happens. But the website is where it gets interesting, because I say you mouse over and you get a pop-up that explains all of those. And then in here, we did over 100 blogs that deal with the history and art of the time as well. So it took about 7 months of design. This took about 8 months worth of painting and consideration on that.